The rain pounded my skin as his taillights disappeared into the storm. Choose her or me, I demanded. He chose her. But as I stood drenched on that empty highway, a sleek black car slowed beside me. The window lowered, revealing the face of the man who'd sworn to destroy my family's company. Need a ride, Miss Carter? He asked, his smile dangerous yet strangely comforting. I've been waiting for you to fall. I wrapped my arms around myself, rainwater streaming down my face, mixing with tears I refused to acknowledge. Julian Blackwood, the shark of the business world, the man who'd tried to hostile take over Carter Innovations 3 times in the past 2 years, was the last person I expected to see on this abandoned stretch of highway. I'd rather drown, I said, turning away from his Bentley. Suit yourself. His window began to rise and panic surged through me despite my pride. The nearest town was 15 miles away, my phone was dead, and the storm was intensifying by the minute. Wait. The word escaped before I could stop it. The window lowered again and Julian leaned forward, raindrops catching in his dark hair. Changed your mind already, Vivian? That's faster than your quarterly earnings drop. 2 hours earlier none of this seemed possible. Maxwell and I had been driving to the Nakamura meeting, the merger that would save Carter Innovations from its 3rd consecutive quarter of losses. My engagement ring caught the light as I reviewed financial projections on my tablet, everything perfectly in order. Then his phone rang. Max, please, Elise's voice trembled through the speaker. They won't let me leave. I think someone slipped something in my drink at the client dinner. I felt Maxwell tense beside me before he cleared his throat. Where are you? The Rosewood. Room 512. Please hurry. The call ended and Maxwell's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Turn around, I said quietly, closing my tablet. She needs help. The Nakamuras are waiting. This merger is everything to your family's company. And what is Elise to you? His silence told me everything. For weeks I'd noticed the late-night texts, the lingering glances in the office, the sudden business trips that coincided with her marketing conferences. I'd buried my suspicions beneath spreadsheets and profit margins, telling myself the company needed stability. She's my marketing director, Maxwell finally said, but his voice held a defensive edge I'd never heard before. A valuable employee who's in trouble. Thunder cracked overhead as rain began pelting the windshield. More valuable than your fiancé? I twisted the 3-carat diamond on my finger. More valuable than the merger meeting we've spent 6 months preparing for? You're being irrational, Vivian. Am I? Then look me in the eyes and tell me you're not sleeping with her. The car swerved suddenly onto the shoulder, tires spraying gravel. Maxwell slammed on the brakes and turned to me, his handsome face contorted with anger. I'm tired of your accusations. Your paranoia is affecting the company. By paranoia? The board is questioning your decision to promote a junior marketer to director after 3 months. A woman with barely any experience. She has fresh perspectives. Something you and your family's outdated company desperately need. His words stung like a physical blow. My father had built Carter Innovations from nothing, and I'd spent my entire career honoring his legacy. So that's it? After everything my family has done for you? My voice was surprisingly steady. My father gave you your first executive position when no one else would touch you after the Westlake scandal. Maxwell's jaw tightened. I've repaid that debt tenfold. Your father's company would be bankrupt without me. Outside, the storm intensified, mirroring the tempest building in my chest. Lightning illuminated the inside of the car in harsh, white flashes, casting shadows across Maxwell's face that made him look like a stranger. I've been having dreams about this, I whispered. Standing in a storm, watching everything I care about disappear. More of your superstitious nonsense, Maxwell scoffed. This is exactly why the board is concerned about your emotional stability. My hand unconsciously moved to the antique silver bracelet on my wrist. My grandmother's, passed down through generations of Carter women. Maxwell had always hated it, calling it costume jewelry unworthy of a CFO. I want you to make a choice right now, I said, surprising myself with the ultimatum. Her or me. Not just personally, professionally too. If you go to her tonight, we're done in every way. For a moment I saw conflict in his eyes. Then his phone buzzed with another text and his expression hardened. Get out. What? You heard me. Get out of the car. I've carried your family's failing company long enough. If you can't support my decisions, then find your own way to the meeting. He unlocked the doors. Choose Vivian. Trust me and stay or get out. In my recurring dream, I always stood alone in the storm, afraid. But now, as I grabbed my purse and stepped out into the deluge, I felt something unexpected: relief. I slammed the door and watched Maxwell drive away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. The rain soaked through my silk blouse and designer suit within seconds, plastering my hair against my face. I fumbled for my phone, but the battery was dead, just as I'd told him minutes earlier. That's when headlights appeared in the distance, approaching slowly. The sleek black Bentley pulled alongside me, window lowering to reveal Julian Blackwood's face, those calculating eyes taking in my bedraggled state. Your precious fiancé finally showed his true colors, Julian observed, the engine of his luxury car purring softly. I've been wondering how long it would take. I stood frozen, rain dripping from my chin as Julian Blackwood extended his hand through the window. The antique bracelet on my wrist suddenly felt warm against my skin, almost as if warning me, or encouraging me. The choice is yours, Vivian, Julian said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it across a negotiation table. But I promise you this: accepting my help tonight doesn't mean I'll stop trying to acquire your company tomorrow. Another bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating the dangerous path ahead of me. Julian's Bentley cut through the storm with quiet precision, wipers barely keeping pace with the downpour. Inside, the leather seats smelled of money and power. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, acutely aware of the water I was dripping onto his immaculate interior. The famous Vivian Carter, soaked like a stray cat, Julian remarked, his voice rich with amusement. What would the Financial Times say? Probably that I've finally succumbed to your takeover attempts. I wrung water from my hair onto his floor mat out of spite. Is that what this is? Your newest acquisition strategy? He laughed, the sound unexpectedly genuine. If I wanted to acquire you through manipulation, Miss Carter, I wouldn't be so obvious about it. His eyes flicked to mine in the dim light. Though I admit, finding you abandoned on a highway wasn't in my business plan for the evening. Where are you taking me? I asked, suddenly realizing we weren't heading toward the city center. Roads to downtown are flooded. Julian navigated a sharp turn with one hand on the wheel. My penthouse is closer. You can dry off, call whoever you need to call, and figure out your next move. Your penthouse? Absolutely not. Would you prefer I drop you at a motel? I'm sure there's a charming establishment with hourly rates nearby. I glared at him, but my retort died as another wave of rain slammed into the car. Through the windshield I could see fallen trees and rising water on the main roads. My soaked clothes clung uncomfortably to my skin, and a chill had settled deep in my bones. Fine, I relented. But I'm leaving as soon as the rain stops. Julian's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the city's most exclusive building. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the storm raging across the skyline, lightning illuminating the sleek, minimalist decor. It was exactly what I'd expect from him: modern, expensive, impersonal. Except for one detail. As Julian handed me a plush towel and directed me to a guest suite, I noticed a framed newspaper article on his bookshelf. The headline read, "Local businessman saves child in rare procedure." My father's younger face smiled from the photograph. "Why do you have this?" I asked, pausing mid-step. Julian stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Know thy enemy. I keep tabs on Carter history." He turned away. "The bathroom's through there. I'll find you something dry to wear." I couldn't shake the feeling he was hiding something, but my phone suddenly vibrated to life as I plugged it into a charger in the guest suite. 17 missed calls, 15 from my assistant Zoe, 2 from board members. I called Zoe immediately. "Vivian. Thank God. Where are you?" "The meeting." "What happened with the Nakamuras?" Her hesitation told me everything before she spoke. "Maxwell showed up alone. Told everyone you had an emotional breakdown about his relationship with Elise and refused to attend. The Nakamuras were concerned about company stability and the merger is off," I finished, my stomach dropping. "Not officially. They're reconsidering the terms, but our stock will plummet when the market opens tomorrow. It's already dropping in after-hours trading. There's rumors Maxwell is positioning for a leadership change." Board members are calling about your emotional state. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. That manipulative bastard. Where are you? Do you need me to come get you? I glanced around the luxurious guest suite of the man who'd been trying to destroy my company for years. Somewhere complicated. I'll explain tomorrow. For now, pull together all the documentation on Maxwell's recent decisions, particularly Elise's hiring and promotion, and the missing funds from the Singapore project. You think he's been? I know he has. I just didn't want to see it. After we hung up, I changed into the clothes Julian had left outside the door. A simple gray t-shirt and black sweatpants, both ridiculously large on me but blessedly dry. When I emerged, I found him in the kitchen pouring 2 glasses of scotch. Your company is tanking in after-hours trading, he said without looking up. Maxwell is calling for your resignation citing emotional instability. How do you? I have alerts set for anything Carter-related. He handed me a glass. Interesting strategy, abandoning your CFO before a critical merger meeting. He claims I had a breakdown about his affair with the marketing director. Julian leaned against the counter, studying me over the rim of his glass. And did you? No. I gave him an ultimatum and he chose her. I took a long sip, the scotch burning a path down my throat. But that doesn't explain why you're helping me. He set his glass down with deliberate care. Contrary to what you might think, Ms. Carter, I want to acquire your company at its actual value, not after Maxwell tanks it to serve his girlfriend's ambitions. You think Elise is behind this? I think she's a 28-year-old with a bachelor's in communications who somehow became director at a Fortune 500 company within 3 months of hiring. His smile was razor-sharp. Either she's a marketing savant, or she's offering Maxwell additional services. I hated that he was articulating my own suspicions. Why should I trust anything you say? You've tried to destroy my family's company 3 times. Acquire, not destroy. There's a difference. Julian refilled his glass. And right now, I'm the only ally you have with enough power to counter Maxwell's moves. You want me to partner with you? Against my own fiancé? Ex-fiancé, he corrected, nodding toward my bare ring finger. And yes, a temporary alliance until we neutralize the threat he poses to both our interests. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the sharp angles of his face. In that moment, with the storm raging outside and my life unraveling, Julian Blackwood's proposition was the most dangerous temptation I'd ever faced. My bracelet caught the light as I raised my glass, drawing Julian's attention. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? He reached for my wrist, his fingers stopping just short of touching the antique silver. That's an unusual piece, he said quietly. My mother had something similar once. Before I could respond, a wave of exhaustion hit me. I swayed slightly, my vision blurring at the edges. Julian steadied me with a hand on my elbow, his touch unexpectedly gentle. Get some rest, Vivian. Tomorrow we plan your counterattack. That night my recurring dream changed. I still stood in the storm, but this time I wasn't alone. Julian stood in the distance beside a hospital bed where my father lay. Both men were staring at me, trying to tell me something I couldn't hear over the thunder. I woke with a gasp, wondering what my subconscious was trying to reveal about the man sleeping just down the hall. The man who might be my salvation or my final destruction. Morning arrived with merciless clarity. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-out sky and the wreckage of my career. Julian's driver, a stone-faced man who introduced himself only as Harris, drove me to Carter Innovations headquarters in silence. I'd insisted on wearing my rain-dampened suit from yesterday rather than borrowing more of Julian's clothes. Better to face Maxwell looking rumpled but professional than in my rival's sweatpants. As we pulled up to the gleaming glass tower bearing my family name, Harris handed me a business card with a single phone number. Mr. Blackwood said you might need this today. I slipped it into my pocket without comment and stepped out into the morning chaos. The lobby was buzzing with whispers that died as I walked through. Employees averted their eyes or stared too long. Everyone had heard some version of yesterday's events. I kept my chin high, back straight, proceeding to the elevator as if it were any normal day. Zoe intercepted me before I reached my office, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd been there all night. Emergency board meeting in 30 minutes, she whispered, falling into step beside me. Maxwell's calling for a vote on your position. Of course he is. I unlocked my office door, relieved to find it still had my name on it. What else? The Nakamuras officially pulled out of the merger talks this morning. Stock dropped 18% at opening bell. Financial press is running with the emotional breakdown narrative. She hesitated. And there's rumors Elise has been promoted to VP of Strategic Development. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. After 3 months. He's not even trying to be subtle anymore. There's something else. Zoe glanced toward the door before handing me a USB drive. Security footage from the executive floor for the past month. And some interesting emails between Elise and Riverstone Corporation. Riverstone. I frowned, plugging the drive into my computer. They've been trying to poach our clean energy patents for years. Zoe nodded grimly. She's been feeding them information. Meeting notes, R&D timelines, prototype specs, all forwarded from Maxwell's email account. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Maxwell sleeping with Elise, but he was allowing her to funnel corporate secrets to our rivals. Whether he was complicit or merely careless didn't matter. The damage was the same. This isn't just an affair, I murmured, scrolling through the emails. It's corporate espionage. And there's one more thing. Zoe's voice dropped even lower. Your bracelet, the one with your grandmother's tracking software embedded in it? It recorded everything yesterday when Maxwell abandoned you. Audio only, but it's clear enough. I glanced down at the antique silver bracelet on my wrist, the one piece of jewelry I never removed. My grandmother, the first female Carter to sit on the board, had modified it years ago to record critical meetings during an era when male executives routinely stole her ideas. I'd never activated the function myself, thinking it a relic of a bygone era. It activated automatically? Asked surprised. Proximity sensors. When your heart rate spiked during your argument with Maxwell, it started recording. Captured everything, including him admitting the board is questioning his decisions about Elise. For the first time since the storm, I felt a flicker of hope. Let's make copies. 20 minutes later, I walked into the boardroom with my head high and a portfolio of evidence under my arm. Maxwell stood at the head of the table, looking fresh and composed in a new suit. His expression of concern would have been convincing if I hadn't spent the past 3 years watching him perfect it for investor meetings. Vivian, he said, injecting warmth into his voice. We were worried about you. After your episode yesterday. You mean after you abandoned me on a flooded highway during a storm because I questioned your relationship with a subordinate? I set my portfolio on the table, enjoying how his facade cracked slightly. Let's not pretend, Maxwell. Not anymore. The 12 board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Most were old guard executives who'd served with my father. A few were newer additions, brought in during Maxwell's tenure as CEO. All were watching our confrontation with the wary expressions of people witnessing a marital spat in public. This is exactly the kind of emotional behavior I'm concerned about, Maxwell said, addressing the board rather than me. Vivian has always been passionate about the company. But lately, that passion has manifested as paranoia and jealousy that's interfering with her duties as CFO. Interesting perspective. I opened my portfolio with deliberate calm. Before we continue, I think the board should review some documents about Elise Lin's unusual career trajectory at Carter Innovations. Particularly her access to sensitive information that somehow found its way to Riverstone Corporation. Maxwell's composure faltered. What are you talking about? I distributed copies of Elise's emails to each board member. I'm talking about corporate espionage, facilitated either knowingly or negligently by our CEO. The room erupted in low murmurs as they reviewed the evidence. Maxwell's face flushed with anger, then drained of color as he realized the depth of what I'd uncovered. This is a fabrication, he sputtered. Vivian is trying to deflect from her own failures with the Nakamura merger. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from my bracelet. Maxwell's voice filled the room. I've carried your failing company long enough. If you can't support my decisions, then find your own way to the meeting. The board members exchanged glances. Harold Winters, the longest-serving director, removed his glasses slowly. You left our CFO stranded during a flash flood warning? On the night of our most important merger meeting in a decade. Before Maxwell could respond, the boardroom door opened. Julian Blackwood walked in, immaculately dressed and radiating the confident authority that had made him legendary in business circles. "Forgive the interruption," he said smoothly, "but I believe I have information relevant to your current discussion." Maxwell's face contorted with rage. "What is he doing here?" "Security. I invited him," I said, holding Maxwell's gaze. "As it happens, Mr. Blackwood has a proposal that might salvage what's left of our relationship with the Nakamura Group." The board members looked between us, confusion giving way to intrigue. Julian took advantage of their hesitation to distribute folders of his own. "A modified joint venture," he explained. "Carter Innovations retains majority control of its patents while Blackwood Industries provides the manufacturing infrastructure the Nakamuras were concerned about. I've already discussed preliminary terms with their board chair." "This is absurd," Maxwell snapped. "You're going to trust the man who's been trying to destroy us for years?" Julian's smile was razor-sharp. "Acquire, not destroy. There's a difference." As the board members flipped through Julian's proposal with growing interest, Maxwell leaned close to me, his voice a venomous whisper. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning. I made you Vivian. I can break you just as easily." Before I could respond, Julian stepped between us, his tall frame blocking Maxwell as effectively as a shield wall. "Is there a problem, Kent?" The tension between the two men crackled like electricity. For a moment I was caught between two of the most powerful corporate titans in the country, one I thought I'd loved and one I'd thought I hated. Now I wasn't sure about either. The board voted to table Maxwell's leadership concerns and explore Julian's proposal, buying me precious time. As the meeting adjourned, the directors filed out, some nodding respectfully in my direction. A small victory after months of diminishing influence. Julian remained behind, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You should be pleased," he said once we were alone. "You've survived the first counterattack. This isn't a military campaign, Julian. Isn't it?" He collected his briefcase. "Maxwell just lost his first battle, but the war is far from over. He'll regroup, possibly with Riverstone's backing." I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "Why are you really helping me? And don't give me that line about wanting to acquire my company at full value." Julian's expression shifted subtly. "Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to see Maxwell Kent's downfall." "What did he do to you?" "It's not what he did to me." Julian checked his watch. "I have meetings to attend. We'll talk soon, Vivian." As he walked out, I noticed something I'd missed before. A slight limp in his right leg, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it. Another piece of the puzzle I couldn't yet place. I spent the afternoon reassuring nervous department heads and fielding calls from concerned clients. By evening I was running on caffeine and determination alone. The questions Julian had evaded kept circling in my mind, along with the image of my father's face in that framed newspaper article. I needed answers. And I knew where to start looking. Sunset Ridge Care Center was located on the outskirts of the city, a tasteful facility where my father had resided since his early-onset Alzheimer's diagnosis 3 years ago. The disease had progressed rapidly, stealing first his memories of recent events, then gradually eroding deeper into his past. On his good days he recognized me. On his bad days he sometimes called me by my mother's name. Today I found him sitting by the window watching birds at a feeder. He looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, though it had only been 2 weeks since my last visit. "Dad." I approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "It's Vivian." He turned, his eyes brightening with recognition. "My little finance genius. You're late for our Tuesday lunch." It was Friday, but I didn't correct him. "Sorry about that. Got caught up at the office. Carter Innovations waits for no one." He chuckled, then frowned slightly. "Where's Maxwell? Didn't he come with you?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Dad's condition made him emotionally vulnerable. Anger or distress could trigger a rapid decline in his lucidity. "Maxwell couldn't make it today," I said carefully, sitting beside him. "Dad, I wanted to ask you about something. Do you remember the Blackwood family?" His expression clouded. "Blackwood?" "Edwin Blackwood was a snake. Tried to bankrupt me in '92. "What about his son?" "Julian Blackwood." Dad's eyes narrowed. "Why are you asking about them? Has that boy contacted you?" I took out my phone and showed him a picture of Julian I'd pulled from a business magazine. This man. Do you know him? Dad stared at the image then looked at my wrist. When he saw my bracelet, his hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping my arm. The Blackwood debt, he whispered urgently. The hospital night. Everything changed. What debt, Dad? What happened at the hospital? But the moment of clarity was already passing. His eyes grew unfocused and he released my wrist, turning back to the window. Your mother loved those birds. Always filling the feeders. My mother had died when I was 8. I'd never seen her feed birds. The facility director caught me at the nurse's station as I was leaving, a kind-faced woman who'd been managing my father's care since his admission. Miss Carter, I've been meaning to call you. We were cleaning out some storage areas and found a box of your father's personal items from his initial intake. Things that didn't fit in his room. Would you like to take them? The cardboard box was surprisingly heavy. I thanked her and carried it to my car, too emotionally drained to look through it immediately. It wasn't until I reached home, a sleek downtown condo that suddenly felt cold and empty without Maxwell's presence, that I dumped the contents onto my dining table. Amid the expected memorabilia, old business awards, photo albums, financial records, I found a manila envelope labeled simply Hospital 1989. Inside was a photograph that made my breath catch. My father standing beside a hospital bed where a thin, elegant woman sat holding an infant. Behind them stood a grim-faced man I recognized as Edwin Blackwood from old business journals. I turned the photo over. Written in my father's precise handwriting, the night everything changed. 2 families, 1 life saved. The infant must be Julian. But why was my father there? And who was the woman? My phone rang, startling me. Julian's number flashed on the screen. We need to talk, he said without preamble when I answered. Maxwell received a package at his office today. Contents unknown, but immediately afterward he started asking questions about me. About us. What kind of questions? The dangerous kind. Julian's voice was tight. Be careful, Vivian. I don't think Maxwell is just concerned about losing his CEO position anymore. After we hung up, I returned to the box, searching for anything else related to the Blackwoods. Near the bottom, I found a weathered leather journal, my father's private business diary. Flipping through it, I found an entry from 1989. Margaret Blackwood called again. Edwin still refuses my offer of help, even with the boy's condition worsening. The man would rather watch his son die than accept anything from me. M says the doctors are giving up hope. The next entry, dated 3 days later. The transplant was successful. Julian is responding well. Edwin was furious when he discovered what we'd done behind his back, but M says he'll come around eventually. Some debts can never be repaid, nor should they be. R doesn't understand why I'm helping the family of my greatest business rival, but some things transcend business. Some secrets must remain buried for everyone's protection. Or was my mother, Rachel? I stared at the diary, pieces clicking into place. Julian's slight limp. The newspaper article. My father's fragmented words about the Blackwood debt. My father had somehow saved Julian's life as a child. But why keep it secret? And what was my father's relationship with Julian's mother? My computer pinged with an email alert. An unmarked message containing only a video file. The thumbnail showed Maxwell entering a parking garage with a man I'd never seen before. I clicked play, my blood turning cold as I watched them examine what appeared to be brake lines on a black sedan. The timestamp was from earlier today. The car was Julian's. I called Julian 7 times before someone finally answered. Not Julian, but a man who introduced himself as Marcus, Julian's head of security. Mr. Blackwood has been in an accident, he said, his voice clipped and professional. Vehicle malfunction. He's in surgery at Memorial Hospital. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. How bad is it? Touch and go. Who is this? Vivian Carter. I need to see him. Miss Carter. His tone cooled noticeably. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Mr. Blackwood is under protection protocols. You don't understand. I have evidence that Maxwell Kent tampered with Julian's brakes. I explained about the video, my voice trembling with urgency. The same thing happened to my father years ago. Please, I need to see Julian. After a long pause, Marcus gave me the room number but warned me that security would be tight. I grabbed my father's journal, the photograph and the USB drive with Maxwell's video, then rushed to the hospital. Rain had started again, fat drops pelting my windshield as thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm rolling in just like in my dreams. The similarity made my skin prickle with foreboding. At the hospital, I was stopped twice by security guards before Marcus himself appeared. A broad-shouldered man with vigilant eyes that missed nothing. He escorted me to Julian's room without speaking, his expression making it clear he considered me a potential threat rather than an ally. Julian looked smaller somehow, lying in the hospital bed with tubes and monitors surrounding him. A bandage wrapped around his head and his right leg was elevated, encased in a cast. His eyes were closed, but the steady beep of the heart monitor offered reassurance. "He just came out of surgery," a nurse explained softly. "The sedation should wear off soon." He was lucky, the crash could have been much worse. I sank into a chair beside the bed, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. I barely knew this man, yet his vulnerability affected me more deeply than I wanted to admit. Marcus positioned himself by the door like a sentinel. "You said you have evidence?" I nodded, pulling out my phone to show him the video. His expression hardened as he watched Maxwell examining the brake lines. "We suspected tampering," he said, "but couldn't prove it. This is..." He was interrupted by Julian's stirring, eyes fluttering open. His gaze was unfocused at first, then sharpened when he saw me. "Vivian." His voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your life, apparently." I leaned forward. "Maxwell tried to kill you." Julian attempted to sit up, wincing in pain. "How did you know?" I showed him the video, watching his face carefully. He didn't look surprised, just grimly satisfied, as if a theory had been confirmed. "This isn't the first time," he said, settling back against the pillows. 20 years ago someone cut my father's brake lines. He survived, but the woman with him didn't." "Your mother?" Julian's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about my mother?" I hesitated, then placed the hospital photograph on his blanket. Julian stared at it, emotion flickering across his face too quickly to read. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "My father's things. Julian, I think he saved your life as a child. His journal mentions a transplant. Bone marrow, maybe?" Julian was silent for a long moment, then nodded to Marcus. "Give us the room." Marcus looked like he wanted to object, but departed with a curt nod, closing the door behind him. "Your father was my donor," Julian confirmed once we were alone. "I had aplastic anemia as a child. Fatal without a transplant, and no one in my family was a match." "But why would my father help your family?" "His journal says yours were business rivals." Julian's laugh held no humor. "That's putting it mildly. They despised each other. My father built Blackwood Industries specifically to compete with Carter Innovations. To destroy it, actually." "Then why?" "Because of my mother." Julian's eyes met mine. Margaret Blackwood and Richard Carter had an affair before either of us was born. It lasted nearly a year before my father discovered it. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Are you saying..." "No, I'm not your half-brother if that's what you're thinking. The timing doesn't work." Julian shifted, grimacing in pain. "But your father never stopped caring for my mother. When I got sick and needed a donor, she went to him behind my father's back." "And he matched," I whispered. "What are the odds?" "Astronomical. Unless they were related." I finished his thought, mind racing. "Second cousins, maybe? That would explain the compatibility." Julian nodded. "My mother never told my father where the donation came from. He was just relieved I survived. It wasn't until years later that he discovered the truth." "How?" "The brake-cutting incident I mentioned? My father survived, but my mother didn't. In his grief, he found letters she'd kept from your father. He went mad with rage, swore he'd destroy everything Richard Carter loved. I thought of my father's current condition, the timing of his rapid decline. When was this?" 3 years ago. The same time my father's Alzheimer's had accelerated dramatically. Too much of a coincidence. "Julian, did your father do something to my father? Something to cause his condition?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "I've wondered the same thing." A soft knock interrupted us. Zoe stood in the doorway, her expression grave. Vivian, I'm sorry to disturb you, but it's urgent. The board has called an emergency vote on Maxwell's proposal to sell the company to Riverstone. It's happening right now. I checked my watch in disbelief. At 9 p.m.? That's against bylaws. They're calling it a special circumstance session. Maxwell convinced enough directors that waiting until morning would tank the stock further. Julian struggled to sit up. You need to get there. If Maxwell sells to Riverstone, both our companies will be gutted for patents and dissolved, I finished. I know. I'm coming with you. Julian began removing his fore. You just had surgery. And you're walking into an ambush. His eyes met mine, determination overriding pain. We've been set up, Vivian. All of this, your highway abandonment, my accident, it's too coordinated. As if to punctuate his point, thunder cracked outside, the storm intensifying just as it had in my recurring dream. But this time I understood what it meant. The storm wasn't a warning of destruction. It was the breaking point before truth could emerge. Your father saved my life once, Julian said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed with a wince. Perhaps it's time I returned the favor to his daughter. Against medical advice, Julian discharged himself. Marcus produced clothes and helped him into a wheelchair, protesting the entire time. I borrowed a company car from Zoe to drive us to the emergency board meeting, the rain pelting the windshield in sheets as thunder boomed overhead. The weather is certainly dramatic, Julian remarked, his voice tight with pain despite the medication coursing through his system. Like something out of a Gothic novel, I agreed, gripping the wheel as we hydroplaned slightly. Two rival families, dark secrets, attempted murder. All we're missing is a grand ball where everything comes to a head. Julian's laugh turned into a grimace. Funny you should mention that. The industry charity gala is tonight at the Winters Hotel. Many of your board members are probably there now. I nearly swerved off the road. The gala. Of course. That's why Maxwell scheduled the vote for tonight. Half the board will be absent or distracted. Or drunk on champagne and easy to manipulate. I made a hard right turn, changing course. Then that's where we need to be. The Winters Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the city's elite informal wear. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner as waiters circulated with champagne. Despite our disheveled appearance, me still in yesterday's rumpled suit, Julian pale and leaning heavily on a cane Marcus had procured, the doorman recognized us immediately. Miss Carter, Mr. Blackwood. He nodded, eyes widening slightly at Julian's condition but professional enough not to comment. The event is already underway. Then we're fashionably late, Julian said smoothly, offering me his arm for support though I suspected he needed mine more. Our entrance caused a ripple through the crowd. Conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers erupted in our wake. Most shocking, perhaps, was the sight of us together. The heirs of Carter and Blackwood, sworn corporate enemies, arriving as a united front. I spotted several board members by the bar, including Harold Winters, looking uncomfortable in black tie. Across the room, Maxwell held court with a group of investors, Elise clinging to his arm in a red dress that seemed deliberately chosen to stand out. When he saw us, his champagne glass froze halfway to his lips, genuine shock registering on his face. Target acquired, Julian murmured, his breath warm against my ear. And he's not alone. Following his gaze, I noticed a silver-haired man in conversation with one of the Riverstone executives, Edwin Blackwood, Julian's father. The older Blackwood hadn't attended industry events in years, making his presence tonight significant. Your father and Riverstone? I asked under my breath. A recent development, Julian replied grimly. Divide and conquer time, Vivian. You take the board members, I'll handle the Asian investors. Meet in the middle. We separated, Julian moving with surprising grace despite his injuries. I approached Harold Winters and his group, plastering on my most professional smile. Miss Carter, Harold said, surprise evident in his voice. We weren't expecting you tonight, given the circumstances. What circumstances would those be, Harold? My supposed emotional breakdown, or the illegal board meeting Maxwell called to sell our company while half of you are here drinking champagne? Harold's face flushed. That meeting was postponed. Maxwell couldn't secure enough votes remotely. So he's working the room tonight instead, I observed, nodding toward where Maxwell was now deep in conversation with another board member. Let me guess, he's telling everyone Carter Innovations is failing, and Riverstone's offer is the only way to salvage shareholder value. Harold shifted uncomfortably. The numbers he presented were compelling. Without the Nakamura merger. We have alternatives, I interrupted, pulling out my phone to show him Julian's proposal. This joint venture preserves Carter Innovations' independence while giving us the manufacturing capacity the Nakamuras were concerned about. With Blackwood Industries? Harold looked skeptical. The same company that's tried to acquire us 3 times? Sometimes the devil you know is better than the one you don't, I said, nodding toward where Maxwell was now laughing with the Riverstone executives. At least Julian has been honest about his intentions. While Harold studied the proposal, I continued my circuit of the room, speaking briefly with each board member present. Some were receptive, others skeptical, but all listened, which was more than Maxwell had allowed lately. Across the ballroom I could see Julian working similar magic with the Asian investors. His fluent Japanese seemed to be impressing them, and several were nodding appreciatively as he spoke. We were making progress until Maxwell finally intercepted me near the dessert table. Quite the performance, he said, his smile tight. The wounded CFO seeking justice. Does the board know you spent last night with our biggest competitor? Does Elise know you're selling her out along with the company? I countered. Riverstone won't keep either of you once they've gutted our patents. By morning the storm had cleared, leaving behind a washed-clean sky and the wreckage of Maxwell's career. News stations ran the story on continuous loop. Prominent CEO Maxwell Kent arrested for corporate espionage, attempted murder and fraud. The video of him tampering with Julian's brakes had been anonymously sent to every major news outlet overnight. I sat in my office watching the coverage with a strange sense of detachment. The bracelet lay on my desk, its hidden compartment now empty. The micro SD card it had contained was in the hands of forensic experts who'd already confirmed it held evidence of Maxwell's crimes dating back 3 years. Evidence my father had apparently been collecting before his health declined. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Harold Winters entered, looking tired but resolute. The board just finished an emergency session, he said, taking a seat across from me. Maxwell has been removed as CEO, effective immediately. I assumed as much. What you might not have assumed, Harold continued, is that we've unanimously voted to offer you the position. I blinked, genuinely surprised. Me? Not an interim from outside. Harold smiled, the expression softening his usually stern face. Your father always said you were meant for this chair. The board agreed it's time we listened to Richard Carter again. After he left, I stood at my office window looking out at the city skyline. 3 days ago I'd been CFO of a struggling company, engaged to a man I thought I knew, living a life that felt increasingly hollow. Now I'd been offered the CEO position of my family's company, my fiancé was in federal custody, and I discovered family secrets that span generations. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Dinner tonight? We need to talk about the microSD card. I'd forgotten he'd seen it before the FBI took it as evidence. Before I could respond, another text came through. Also, my father wants to meet you. Unsurprisingly, he's not thrilled about our alliance. I smiled despite myself. Dinner first. Edwin later. I can only handle one Blackwood at a time. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river, the kind of place with no menus and chefs who created personalized courses based on a brief conversation about preferences. Julian looked better than he had at the gala. Color back in his face, though he still moved carefully to accommodate his injuries. The doctors are furious with me, he said as we settled at a corner table. Apparently emergency discharges and charity galas aren't on the standard recovery plan for accident victims. Nothing about the past few days has been standard, I replied, accepting a glass of wine from our server. I've been offered the CEO position. Congratulations, Julian said, raising his glass in a toast. Though it leaves us in an interesting position. How so? You're now the head of Carter Innovations and I'm the head of Blackwood Industries. Our companies have been rivals for decades. The joint venture proposal I presented was predicated on us being underdogs fighting Maxwell and Riverstone. I studied him across the candlelight. Are you withdrawing the offer? Actually, I'm expanding it. Julian set down his glass. Instead of a limited joint venture focused on the Nakamura needs, I'm proposing a strategic partnership. Not a merger, Both companies remain independent with their own boards and leadership. But we collaborate on key projects, share certain resources, and present a united front to the market. Why not just acquire us as you've tried to do 3 times before? Julian's expression sobered. Because I no longer want to erase my father's legacy, or absorb yours. Our families have been trying to destroy each other for generations. Maybe it's time to build something together instead. As our first course arrived, I considered his proposal. It made business sense, but something else was bothering me. Maxwell said something strange at the gala, that you were funding my father's care. Is that true? Julian hesitated, then nodded. Yes. When your father's condition worsened, he contacted me directly. Carter Innovations insurance wouldn't cover the experimental treatments he wanted to try, and he didn't want to drain company resources. He asked me for a personal loan. Why would he come to you of all people? Because of what was on that microSD card. Julian leaned forward. Your father had been gathering evidence against Maxwell for years, long before his symptoms appeared. He suspected Maxwell was selling secrets, but needed proof before he could move against his own CEO. So he put the evidence in my grandmother's bracelet, I said, the pieces falling into place. The one thing he knew I'd never take off. And he came to me because he needed someone who would continue the investigation if his health failed. Someone outside Carter Innovations who couldn't be influenced by Maxwell, someone who understood what it meant to protect a family legacy. And you agreed? Why? Our families have been enemies for decades. Julian's eyes met mine. Because 20 years ago your father gave me his bone marrow knowing it might ruin his friendship with my mother. He saved my life without expecting anything in return. When he asked for my help, how could I refuse? The revelation settled over me like a warm blanket. My father, even as his mind was beginning to fail, had been protecting the company and me until the end. He'd entrusted that protection to Julian, the son of his greatest rival, because some bonds transcend business. There's something else, Julian said quietly. The FBI found more than just evidence against Maxwell on that SD card. They found a video message from your father, recorded shortly before his condition deteriorated. It was addressed to both of us. My heart skipped. Both of us? What did it say? They haven't released it yet. But they've scheduled a viewing for tomorrow morning. Julian reached across the table, his hand covering mine. Whatever secrets are still buried between our families, we'll face them together. As we left the restaurant, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. The truth about your mother is not what you think. Coordinates attached. Come alone. I showed Julian the message. He immediately called Marcus to trace the number. It's a burner phone, Marcus reported back. But the coordinates are for a lakeside cottage about 2 hours north of the city. Could be a trap, Julian said, his expression darkening. Maxwell still has allies who might blame you for his downfall. Or it could be answers, I replied, thinking of my mother who had died, supposedly in an accident, when I was a child. I need to go. Julian studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Not alone. Whatever waits at those coordinates, we face it together. The storm had passed, but as we drove toward the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading into another. One that had been brewing for decades before either of us was born. The lakeside cottage looked like something from a postcard. Weathered cedar shingles, stone chimney, and a wraparound porch overlooking still waters that reflected the morning sky. It seemed too peaceful to harbor dark secrets, too ordinary to be the culmination of our journey. Stay behind me, Julian said as we approached the front door. Despite my protests, he'd insisted on coming with me, his injured leg now supported by a proper medical brace rather than sheer stubbornness. Before we could knock, the door swung open. A woman stood in the threshold, slender, silver-haired, with eyes that matched my own. Eyes I hadn't seen in 20 years. Mom. The word escaped me in a breathless whisper. Claire Carter looked exactly as she did in the last photograph I had of her. Only older, with fine lines around her eyes and mouth that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for me. Vivian. My beautiful girl. I stood frozen, unable to process the impossible. My mother, who I'd been told died in a boating accident when I was 8, was alive. Standing before me. Breathing. This isn't possible, I managed to say. Dad said you died. There was a funeral. I have your ashes in an urn. I know, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry for that pain. She looked past me to Julian, her expression shifting to one of recognition. You look just like your mother. Julian's face paled. You knew Margaret Blackwood? Please, both of you, come inside. There's so much to explain. The cottage interior was warm and rustic, with books filling every shelf and photographs covering the walls, many of them of me at various ages taken from a distance. My graduations, award ceremonies, company events. My mother had been watching me my whole life from the shadows. Why? I demanded, unable to contain the storm of emotions any longer. Why would you fake your death? Why would Dad lie to me all these years? Claire gestured for us to sit, then took a deep breath. Because Edwin Blackwood threatened to kill us both if I didn't disappear. Julian stiffened. My father. Claire nodded. It started before either of you were born. I was working as a biochemist for a research firm that collaborated with both Carter Innovations and Blackwood Industries. I discovered evidence that Edwin was selling faulty medical equipment to developing countries, defective heart valves that were killing people. I took the evidence to Richard, who tried to report it to the authorities. But Edwin was powerful, with connections in regulatory bodies. He buried the investigation and swore revenge on us both. When Margaret, your mother, Julian, learned what her husband had done, she left him briefly. During that time she and Richard became close. The affair, Julian said quietly. Yes. Margaret eventually returned to Edwin for your sake, but she stayed in contact with Richard. When you became ill as a child, she reached out to him in desperation. Your transplant was successful, but Edwin found out Richard was the donor. Claire's hands tightened around her teacup. The threats escalated. When my car's brakes failed with 8-year-old Vivian in the back seat, we knew it wasn't an accident. Richard and I decided the only way to keep our daughter safe was for me to disappear. If Edwin thought I was dead, he might leave Vivian alone. And that's why you never remarried, I said to Claire. Why you lived as a ghost all these years. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I've watched you from a distance, guided your company through anonymous investments, protected what I could. When Margaret died in that car crash, I feared Edwin would come after Richard directly. And when Richard's Alzheimer's appeared so suddenly. It wasn't Alzheimer's, Julian realized, the color draining from his face. My father poisoned him, didn't he? Slow-acting neurotoxin, Claire confirmed. By the time I figured it out, the damage was irreversible. But I could slow its progression with treatments. The experimental procedures Julian was funding, I said, pieces clicking into place. That was you. Working through Julian, yes. Richard knew Edwin wouldn't suspect his own son of helping his enemy. I turned to Julian, seeing the shock and horror in his eyes as he processed that his father had not only killed his mother but poisoned my father as well. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, my mother said gently. Edwin kept his darkest secrets even from you. Why contact us now? I asked. After all these years in hiding? Because Edwin is dying. Pancreatic cancer. He has weeks, maybe days. His leverage is gone. Claire reached for my hand. And because the FBI found me after they examined the contents of your bracelet. Richard had included my location in his final message to you both. The video, Julian said. We're scheduled to view it tomorrow. Then you'll hear it from him directly. Claire smiled sadly. His mind may have been failing, but his heart never did. As twilight fell over the lake, my mother shared more stories. Of her life in hiding, of ways she had secretly helped both me and Julian over the years, guiding our companies from the shadows. She had been the anonymous investor who saved Blackwood Industries during the 2008 financial crisis. The mysterious benefactor who provided Carter Innovations with breakthrough research just when we needed it most. So what happens now? I asked as we prepared to leave. Are you coming back to the city? Soon, she promised. After Edwin is gone and the last threat passes. But first, you two have companies to run, perhaps together, from what I hear. Julian and I exchanged glances. News travels fast, he remarked. I've always kept tabs on both of you, Claire said with a small smile. Your partnership is what Richard and Margaret would have wanted all along, what I've hoped for too. On the drive back to the city, Julian was unusually quiet, processing everything we'd learned. Finally he spoke. I've spent my entire career trying to honor my father's legacy. A legacy built on corruption, murder, and lies. You're not responsible for his crimes, Julian. No, but I am responsible for what happens next. He looked at me, determination replacing the shock in his eyes. The partnership between our companies, I still want it. But now for different reasons. 3 weeks later, we stood together at the launch of the Carter Blackwood Sustainable Energy Initiative, our first joint venture as partner companies. The business world was still buzzing about our unexpected alliance, with speculation running wild about our professional and personal relationship. As we prepared to address the gathered press and investors, another storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, wind whipping around the rooftop venue. Just like the night we met, Julian observed, joining me at the railing where I stood watching the approaching weather front. The night you found me abandoned on the highway, I agreed. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here? He smiled, offering me the shelter of his umbrella as the first raindrops began to fall. I had hopes. I laughed, surprised by his admission. Really? Even then? Even then? His free hand found mine, fingers intertwining with comfortable familiarity. I'd been watching you outmaneuver Maxwell for months, waiting for the right moment to approach you. The storm just provided the perfect opportunity. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but unlike in my recurring dreams, I felt no fear, only anticipation. The storm that had once represented chaos and loss now symbolized cleansing and renewal. As we turned to head inside, I caught sight of my bracelet, repaired and back on my wrist where it belonged. In the strange light of the storm, the silver seemed to glow with an inner radiance, as if activated by some unseen force. Later that night, after the successful launch and congratulatory dinners, I examined it more closely. The intricate engraving along its edge, which I had always assumed was merely decorative, now revealed itself as words in the right light. The greatest partnerships come from the strongest rivals. Trust the storm to guide you home. My grandmother's message, or perhaps my father's added later, seemed to reach across time with uncanny prescience. I thought back to my recurring dream, now understanding its true meaning. I had never been standing alone in the storm. I simply hadn't been able to see the figure waiting for me through the rain, hand extended, with an umbrella to shelter us both. Sometimes I reflected as Julian's arm wrapped around me on the balcony of what was now our shared apartment. You have to be abandoned on a highway to find your true direction. Sometimes the fiercest rivals become the strongest allies. And sometimes, the storm you fear is actually guiding you exactly where you need to be.